the email notification about today's town hall. This town hall will be recorded, and a link to the recording will be available on the Secretary of State's website under the Charities tab. By choosing to join the town hall, you are consenting to the recording, and the recording and the presentation will be available, again, under the Charities tab on the Secretary of State's website. Please know that the information you receive today is for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be legal advice. Let me repeat that. The recording and the presentation is provided for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be legal advice. Time is reserved at the end for questions, and you may find that your questions are answered as the presentation progresses. You're welcome to place questions in the chat box, but to avoid and prevent any confusion about the source of information and responses, please, we ask our attendees not to respond to the questions. Our staff will respond to questions and announce them also at the end of the town hall. We'll do our very best to answer all of them. And of course, we'll invite questions during the Q&A session at the end of the session today. Unfortunately, we've had some very well-intended participants share some information that's either been outdated or inaccurate. So we just want to make sure that the information that's provided is accurate, and the source is that of our office. So without further ado, I don't believe Secretary Lee has been able to join us. So without further ado, please allow me to introduce our fabulous division administrator on his birthday today, Mr. Michael Schlein. Mike?
Hey there. Thanks, Kathy. Wow, every now and then. Oops. So sorry to interrupt everybody there during her greeting. Today, compliance and enforcement, charitable organizations, how to avoid complaints. So we're just going to go down some of the more common ways people knowingly or sometimes even unknowingly violate the Maryland Solicitations Act, and how to avoid that, and what happens if somebody does, and how we try to deal with those issues. So the law regulating charitable solicitation in Maryland is the Maryland Solicitations Act, Title VI of the Business Regulation Article of the Annotated Code of Maryland. Before we get too deep into what happens when things go wrong or how things can go wrong, just throw out, kind of remind everybody about online registrations and talk about that for a few, because that actually interlays with enforcement and compliance. So we had an online system go live August 15th of last year, taking online registrations as of January 1st, 2023. I say, as much as I said, don't worry if you've submitted a paper application, we're still going to process it if we have it here at this time. Communications, including renewal reminders and compliance letters, will now be coming from the new registration system. They'll be sent via email. Anybody that would have received one here recently, if you filed an online application, would notice that the wording looks very similar to the traditional letter that used to be mailed, but a different, coming from the one-stop letterhead on the top, so to speak, rather than the SOS letterhead at the top. But same thing about being current, being registered, when you're due next, things of that nature. So, the benefit here of online system is that it sends out these notices. They're automated messages. They go out to you. On our end, it's no longer sending registration letters one at a time to our almost 18,000 charities that file with us. So we're able to make sure the communications get out in a timely manner and arrive to the email address provided by the organization, rather than sticking it in the mail times 18,000 renewal reminders a year and hoping they make it to you. So the online system has allowed us to be able to send more renewal reminders and reminders about due dates coming and going, in hopes that it helps an organization stay compliant with the registration aspect of the law. And if your charitable organization is already registered, do not submit a new application. There's a process for creating a one-stop account and claiming a record. If you have been registered with our office, your charity has a record there on One Stop, and it just needs to claim it to file online. And if the organization owes part of an annual registration from a prior year, we may still request it be sent outside of the system to us, especially if it's something here but owes us some documentation. One of the, as nice as online systems are, they can't cure every possible scenario. And one of the things we found ourselves running into is folks that have sent a paper app. We've cashed a check, we haven't yet processed it. They go online, they submit an online application, an online payment. Now we've got two payments, which we will ultimately send you a refund for. But why pay us twice if you only have to pay us once, right? We don't want your money more than once if you don't have to send it to us, and causes you to have money that we're holding on to that we need to give back. And then we also have to go through the steps of giving that back, which takes some time and effort. And so just making sure that, you're filing online now, that's great. If you sent in paper, don't panic and send it online. If you haven't heard from us, check in with us and make sure we've got it, we processed it, or what needs to be done. In terms of accessing One Stop, the online system, there's a process for creating your account. The email address that was last provided for the organization's registration is the one we use. We've been asking for email addresses on our annual registration now for 4 or 5 years. It's been mandatory to provide, in mind of going online. So make sure that the email address you've been providing is the email address that we should be contacting you at. If it is not, let us know and we can fix that, so that the proper email address is used for claiming the records and receiving correspondence from the system. Claiming the record on One Stop, there's a process for that. There's a user guide, there's a video on our charity page. You see the web address there, sos.maryland.gov/charities, /pages/default. That's the charity homepage on our website. Bunch of user guides on there, one for creating an account, one for filing charitable registrations, annual registrations, MCC applications, navigating the system in general, one for professional solicitors, separate town hall about professional solicitors coming up soon. And use those user guides, right? Use the video if you're having a hard time claiming the record. The video is fantastic. It walks you through step by step of creating an account and claiming the record. The one piece of feedback I think we've consistently heard, or where folks have been tripped up, is claiming the record. So that video is there. Please use it to help out with that process. The other thing we've heard is once the record's been claimed and people figure out how to file their renewal online, they pretty positive feedback about that online renewal application. So get our record claimed, and just in general, some tips for using the online system before we get into the compliance stuff. You can authorize additional individuals. So we talked about the email address that's on file being the one that we're using for contacting organizations now, making sure it's the right one. Just because that's the one email address that the system recognizes you under and allows you to claim your record with. Once you've done that, you can start adding additional email addresses and individuals to have access to the record online, so that they have access and get the communications. The form is also built to ask for what is required based on your answers to the questions. And it's going to update itself based on the answers to the initial questions on the form. So if you go into the system and you go in to file your annual update of registration, you're going to get a series of questions about contributions received on the 990 and annual registration that's being filed. Based off of those answers, the form's going to kind of morph on you. If you're under 25,000 a year, it's going to take you the exempt organization fundraising notice form and have you submit information to meet that requirement. If you're 25,000 or more, it's going to take you to the annual update of registration form and have you submit the documentation required based upon your answers for that annual type of filing. So the form is built to be dynamic and change based on the answer provided to ensure that the right stuff is submitted by the organization. One of the things we've run into in the past is everybody kind of just gives us a one of everything and hopes it's right. And this hopefully cleans up that. And also the other big key is it obviously makes you answer the questions that are required to have an answer. So it'll eliminate some of those incomplete filings and help organizations be compliant and hopefully help them get it right the first time they file. So we've noticed, online that we're sending less renewals back, sending less new registrations back that come through the online system. So hopefully it'll be a help to everybody, especially once you get through the record claiming process and using it to
And
submit.
Mike, I think that's really the whole point, right?
Mhm.
Where they're just to iterate again, where folks have ordinarily had problems in the past or reported problems in the past, is because they didn't have the correct email. And, watching that video step by step really is a good tool to be able to learn exactly the process. So please be patient with it. I think if you watch the video, if you follow the instructions, if you verify the email that we currently have on file, you need to change it. You can change it after the fact, but you need to use the one that we have on file because that was the one that was provided to us by your organizations and therefore is recognized by One Stop at this time. But as Mike said, you can change it. So it's pretty simple once you get going.
Yeah, exactly. It's the getting going where I know we've heard the most folks getting tripped up. It's claiming the record. So watch that video, and if that is an email address that's no longer in use, you can email us outside of the system at that email on the prior page or dlcharity_sos@maryland.gov, and let us know, hey, we need this change now because this person's not here, and that's fine. You can do that to get that record claimed. Talking about the forms and completing forms and trying to ensure that they're more complete more often, more of the time. One of the things that we still see sometimes is folks noting wrong fiscal years on the form. We also see folks attaching the unsigned 990 or 990 EZ. Make sure where it instructs you to attach the signed copy of a 990 if you're a 990 filer or 990 EZ filer. Make sure it's the signed copy of the form or that it has the e-file signature page attached. Make sure you're noting the fiscal year that you're reporting on the form. Some folks get this in the paper world a lot. We'll just kind of write the year and date that they're filing it rather than the fiscal year that's being reported. Make sure we're noting that information. For organizations that have a religious exemption from solicitation registration, you'll continue to submit your 990s annually, and you can just submit them to us via email. You can request religious exemption through the system, but in terms of just updating the numbers annually, you can just send us the 990s offline. Name changes, same thing. You can update a lot of your information through the system. If you have claimed your record, you can go into your profile and click the edit button and update your address or phone number or email address. But the one thing the system won't let you do is change your name. You have to provide documentation, usually articles of amendment showing the change to your articles of incorporation that includes the new name. That you'll send to us offline and we'll handle that manually. If you are submitting annual registrations for multiple years and owe a late fee, only pay the late fee on one of those filings. Do not double pay the late fee. The reason I explain that or I say that is the late fee calculates itself based on the due date at the top of the form you're submitting. So when you complete a renewal application, when you click to complete that in your profile and it opens up your renewal application, one of the things you'll see at the top is the renewal date. That's the date we have you as being due. If that date is outdated, that means as far as we know, you're not current and something is past due. And if that date is really old, you may want to stop and check with us and reach out to us and say, hey, I noticed the renewal date is 11/15/2020. I thought I was good through now. What's going on? And we can let you know why we have you behind. Maybe a mistake, right? Could be just a mistake from the old paper system that wasn't fixed before everything switched to the online system. Could be that you're not current and that something is in fact missing and that there's something from a prior year that needs to be sent to make the organization's registration current. So if you pull up that application, the renewal, and you see a old due date that's past due, that's because according to our record, something is missing. So if you see that, you want to check in. Pay attention to that due date. Please pay attention. A lot of times, getting online forums will say, I'm not due until 11/15/23. Why am I getting a late fee? I'm current. Well, that renewal date is 11/15/20, 19/21. It's past due, indicating that something is missing from a prior year. But if you know something's missing, or you're missing a few annual registrations and you're trying to submit all at the same time, make sure you pay the late fee on one, but don't pay the late fee on all three. The way the late fee calculates, it's based on the due date. And if you're submitting 3 forms at the same time, it's going to think you have the same due date. So make sure you only pay one and request a waiver of the late fee on the other 2, because you've already paid it on the, one of those forms that you're submitting. So again,
Great points, Mike. Thank you. I think the takeaway is, if you have a question, call our office.
ask.
We want you to be compliant. We want to help you become compliant. That's why we have these town halls, to help you do that. So if there's a question, help, but the online system is created so that it's easy, and really in response to the charities who over the years have asked us for an online filing system. So if there's a question, don't hesitate to reach out, send an email, call, and we're happy to help clarify any questions that you have so that you can become compliant.
And and that's, that really, I'll double down on that too, and say it again, call and ask, send us an email and ask. I've had a few folks that, I guess it kind of send us one of everything, or, a charity where, going back to, I won't obviously name any names, but organization, one sticks out in my mind that they tried to renew. They were due by 11/15/22, and they sent the stuff in May or June of 22, but it was an incomplete filing, and we had mailed them a letter, sent them an email asking for some information. They never saw it. They went back and they filed the same thing again, and then filed the same thing again online, and ended up sending us three payments, and none of those forms had everything that was needed. And of course, they're looking at the form, the same thing. They're seeing the old renewal date, saying, well, we already sent this. This should be good. And, reach out to us up front. We do want you to comply. Registration, we want you to file what is needed. We want you to file it on time. And we do our best to let you know if that's not the case and what is needed. So reach out to us ahead of time. Don't just assume. A lot of times it just leads to frustration. You're saying, I filed the same thing 3 times and I'm still not good. Why? Well, maybe something's missing. Maybe something's not. Maybe it is a mistake from us. But reach out to us and check in, rather than just kind of blindly assuming, well, they must not have got it, or it must not have been done. Ask us.
Right.
We want you to ask us.
Our fabulous charity offices will be able to help and identify if there's a specific document that's missing. We'll be able to help clear the air on that and get you on the right track.
So on to just common complaints and compliance issues we see. So outside of, new system aside now, just in general, whether you're in a paper world or an online filing world, or a mix of both, organizations come into and fall out of compliance. It happens. And as much as we don't want it to happen, it does. Some of the most common violations of the law you see here: 401, whether or not organizations are registered and need to be registered. Just filing an initial registration when one is due, before somebody solicits. The information in the registration statement that is filed, I mentioned a lot of incomplete filings that we get, where folks you get a registration statement and maybe they fill out the form right, but they don't send any of the information required along with it, or they send the information, but they have to fill out the form or don't sign it or something like that. Easy to prevent types of violations of the Maryland Solicitations Act. Fill out the form, make sure it's complete, make sure all the questions are answered, make sure the items that are required along with the filing are submitted. Annual reports, once an organization is registered, filing that annual registration on time with the Maryland Secretary of State's office, and within the time frame allotted. Renewal date is 6 months after the fiscal year ends. There's an automatic extension that the Secretary of State grants out to 10.5 months after the fiscal year ends. So if the organization is due to submit an annual registration, it really has 10.5 months after its fiscal year ends to get it into us, so that it's considered received on time and the organization's registration stays current. If it's after 10.5 months, the organization is late. And if the organization is late for 60 days, it starts getting assessed late fees. And again, we want you to comply. We don't want you to have to pay late fees. So you get that stuff in on time, right? The law allows for the Secretary of State to extend registrations, and we do that automatically for any organization that has a current registration to 10.5 months after the fiscal year ends. An example of that, if your fiscal year ends in December, let's say it ended December 31st, 2022, you have until, effectively November 15th of 2023 to file with us and have it be considered received on time. And even 60 days after that, before you get dinged with a late fee. So lots of time to file, get it in, and with the new online system, you're going to get a renewal reminder. In that scenario where your renewal is June 30th and you have an extension through November 15th, you're going to get a renewal reminder at the end of May. You're going to get another one there in October reminding you, hey, if you haven't filed yet, that extension date's coming due. You're going to get a renewal reminder November 15th. Hey, it's due today. Hey, it was due last month. And that way, hopefully the organization gets those reminders and because, oh yeah, I need to file, we don't want you to be late. We want you to file on time. Other issues that organizations run into, disclosure statements. This is another common one. If an organization has a written solicitation, whether that's on paper or online or in an email, the organization's supposed to have a disclosure statement that explains that the individual that they are soliciting can get a copy of a financial statement from the organization at no cost, or that they can get one from us, for the cost of copies and postage, and let them know how to reach out to us. And, if you're on the other side right there listening to me and go, uh-oh, we don't have that. That's the good news is that's an easy fix, right? That's just text on a website or text in a written solicitation that includes the disclosure statement that's required under the Maryland Solicitations Act. And it has to be conspicuously displayed on any written solicitation. The exact wording is as in 6-101 in the definition section of the law, where it defines what is a disclosure statement. 6.411 explains when it's required and that it needs to be conspicuously displayed. Agreements with professional 6-501 agreements with professional solicitors and fundraising councils. So again, what does the agreement need to have? It needs to be signed by both the charity and the fundraising council or the solicitor. If it's a professional solicitor, whether the contract has to be included, and in that contract, if it's a professional solicitor, it should include text or template text of solicitation. It should also, if it's a professional solicitor contract, part of the text for a charitable solicitation needs to explain that the person making the phone call is a paid solicitor and that a financial statement is available on request. And that so there's some wording that's required in solicitations that needs to be found in the script, which should be included in the contract as per 6-501 in our law. And then also 6.508 fiduciaries. Everybody's heard the term fiduciary. If you're working for a charity, right, you're as a board member or employee or a fiduciary of that charitable organization and its mission. And you have these duties as a fiduciary to do what's in the best interest of the organization and what's in the best interest of the charitable contributions that are received from your solicitations. And that includes spending that money in line with the manner by which it was solicited.
That's a really good point, Mike. And I know a lot of people get twisted around a bit around that word fiduciary. It is just an important responsibility of board members and everybody to whom financial matters have been entrusted. And it really comes from the Latin fiducia, which means trust, right? So any person, board member particularly, to whom a trust has been made to safeguard the donations, in this case of charitable organizations, that they are actually being assigned as they were intended to the charitable cause and the mission and purpose of the organization.
Yeah, exactly. You're there to support the organization and its mission. And the law does explain that you are a fiduciary as to the contributions that the organization collects and spends. So you want to make sure you're fulfilling that role to the best of your ability. Some other things that we run into, unfortunately, is applications of contributions. So an organization has to spend the money in the manner in which it's solicited, right? I can't say, hey, help support fighting cancer, and then go spend the money on myself or on something completely unrelated to the manner in which it was solicited. So the law requires that the says the charitable organization may not apply a charitable contribution in a way substantially inconsistent with a charitable solicitation. So substantially inconsistent is the key. Can't do that. This doesn't mean you can't have overhead expenses. You need to have money to put the lights on, right? Maybe have a building or office or whatever it is, paper, stuff like that. That happens, and that's fine. But we're talking about raising money for one purpose and then spending it on something completely different and unrelated.
And this is exactly what scam artists do. And when they do that, it completely disrupts the reputation of really good, honorable, reputable charities like yours. And so enforcing this is really critical for the integrity of the charities that are really reputable.
Right, and
that's the donations donated by the unsuspecting donors too.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I was going to go there too. Is right. It's not just an organization that does this. If the organization misapplies it, that's bad. But when folks give it to organizations that misapply it, the organizations that will apply it correctly are also losing out. Right, that money was given to an organization that isn't using it for a good purpose, and when an organization like that gets the dollars, that hurts the good charities even more. So 6-607 and 608 kind of run into each other there. False or misleading material, deceptive acts, kind of self-explanatory, right? Don't use false and misleading materials when advertising or soliciting. Don't commit an act that's deceptive, whether somebody decides to give or not because of the deceptive act. The act itself that is still deceptive, right? You can't raise money using some type of deceptive measure. Even if I don't donate, it's still against the law to make the request in a deceptive manner. Misrepresentation, use of marks or printed matter. Again, going down the road of honesty here, right? Unless authorized by a charitable organization, a person may not represent that a charitable organization is that a charitable contribution is requested for a charitable organization, or they may not use a name, symbol, emblem, device, service mark, or printed matter that belongs to or is associated with the charitable organization to solicit charitable contributions. So you can't say you're raising money for another charity unless you have permission from them to do that. You can't use their name, likeness, symbols, any of that unless you have permission to do that. So you can't just go out there and say, I'm going to raise money for this charity, give it to me, right? People can't do that. And as a charity, you don't want folks running around using your name without your knowledge and permission either, right? That's your organization, that's your reputation, and you want to make sure you protect that name and that reputation of your organization, and not have other people using your name without your permission.
And Mike, I think it's worth noting that if anyone on this call or any charitable organization at all detects that someone is doing that, is misrepresenting their charity, please, please, please let us know. File a complaint with our office so that we can investigate and determine, whether or not that it's a valid complaint and action needs to be taken. So that's the only way we know is when and if it's reported to us. So please don't be shy about doing that.
Yes, definitely, definitely. We're going to talk a little about investigations at a high level here a little bit later on. Misrepresentation, charitable or use of proceeds, sponsorship or endorsement without consent. Again, more the same, right? You cannot misrepresent the way proceeds are going to be used, just like you cannot misapply them. Can't say you're going to spend it on something that you have no intention of spending it on. And sponsorship or endorsement without consent. You can't represent that somebody sponsors, endorses, or approves a charitable solicitation, the sale of goods or service for a charitable purpose, or a charitable organization without the consent of that person. So you can't say it's endorsed by somebody it's not. The only caveat to that is a member of the board of directors or trustee of a charitable organization or a person who volunteers to participate in a charitable solicitation is deemed to have consented to the use of the person's name in the charitable solicitation. So, in other words, if you're a board member or trustee or a volunteer participating in this charity's fundraiser, you're deemed to basically be consenting to have your name used in any solicitation. But other than that, you can't be using somebody's name without their permission. Fairly standard there. You can't say somebody endorses something that they don't, unless they do. Willful violations. This is a very broad section of law. A charitable organization may not willfully fail to submit to the Secretary of State when required a registration statement, annual report, or other information, or submit information to us that is materially false. So willful violation, you willingly do this. You knowingly do this. You cannot willfully fail to register or fail to file renewals. You cannot willfully submit false information as part of a registration. It is against the law to do that. Grossly negligent violations, so basically the same thing except for negligent instead of willful. You can't be grossly negligent in a way that causes you to fail to submit registration, annual report, or other information, or be grossly negligent in submitting materially false information as part of a registration to us. So whether it's willful or whether it's gross negligence, it's still against the law to fail to file or file materially false information with our office. So enforcement, what happens? What are we doing here? So we handle enforcement in many manners. I've already talked about some, with the system now, a lot of email communication, more timely, more regular, in hopes of getting organizations to file on time more frequently. But still, we have the option to send letters and make phone calls. We may send an email outside of the registration system from one of us. You might get an email from myself or one of our charity officers about something, or from an investigator or a compliance analyst or internal auditor. You might get an email from one of our Secretary of State employees, not just from the system. We also try to drive compliance by site visits. Sometimes assurances of voluntary compliance or discontinuance, cease and desist orders, even it's seeking an injunction through the legal system. The further along the line there you go, the more serious the matter. But if it's a registration only, we'd much rather solve it by email, letter, phone call, right? Don't let it go so long that we're looking at these more serious measures to drive compliance. And enforcement actions, again, more letters, phone calls, emails, site visits. We're going to do more as needed. Most registration issues can work themselves out using these methods. There may be non-registration issues that we need to work out through these methods as well. And so whether it's registration or something like false and misleading solicitation or deceptive acts or misapplication of a contribution or some type of willful or negligent violation, any of these methods can be used to reach out to the organization and settle the situation, however that may shake itself out. Every case is a little different. So if we're just talking about registration compliance here, you have incomplete initial registrations where an organization either fails to complete it or complete it properly. And an organization in that situation remains incomplete. It's not registered. You have to complete the registration with the Secretary of State's office and have that certificate of registration issued in order to be able to solicit charitable contributions in Maryland. So if you're not registered, you can't solicit. If you submit an incomplete registration, you're still not registered and cannot solicit. So you're going to stay out of compliance until all documentation and any fee, if necessary, is submitted to the Secretary of State's office. And we'll let you know when the registration is complete. If it's submitted online, you're going to get that notification about it being incomplete from the system. And when it is complete, if we approve it, you're going to get that registration email that says you're registered from the system. The other nice thing about the system is you can go into your profile at any time if you're currently registered and generate a certificate of a registration certificate that says you're registered with the Secretary of State to solicit, should you need that. Enforcement actions regarding incomplete registrations. So again, more of the same here, right? Letters, emails, calls, site visits, and the list goes on and on. If the organization knows it needs to register and refuses to register, you have ultimately potentially cease and desist orders or some type of injunction in the legal system that may be filed to deal with that. And if an organization continues to have an incomplete registration and no response is received within 3 years, we're just going to stop contacting that organization and closing it. But really just the organization's not registered, right? If it's not registered and never completes registration, it cannot solicit charitable contributions in Maryland. So at some point in time, we've done what we can do, and we're going to move on because the organization is not registered. And if it ever wants to complete registration in the future, it can always come back and try to register.
Mike, I think the point you drive home again here is we are eager for you to be compliant.
Yeah.
We want to help you do that. So if you have a question, please email or call and let us know what the question is. It's easy to think that you've registered and that you're in good standing, when in fact there may be a single document that hasn't been submitted. And that one document not submitted has prevented you from becoming registered and in good standing. So if there's a question, please contact us so that we can help you help yourselves. Okay?
Yep. Help us help you, right? We want to do that, and please let us do that. Incomplete annual registrations. So this happens as well. Maybe somebody forgets to file for a year. It happens to the best of us. Get that information into us, get back in compliance. Mentioned earlier, annual registrations due within 10.5 months of the fiscal year is ending. If an annual registration is incomplete 60 days after that date, the organization is considered delinquent and a late fee of $25 is assessed. Delinquent registration is when the late fee starts getting assessed. So $25, the late fee increases $25 per month on the first day of each month thereafter until the organization's registration is current. Get it in before there's a late fee. Don't let there be a late fee. Sometimes things happen, we get that. But get it in as soon as you can. Get back into compliance if you are late and have a late fee. And again, I mentioned earlier, if you have more than one annual filing due, you're submitting it online, don't pay the late fee more than once. Pay it once, and then on the other application, just put in a late fee waiver and say, hey, I've already paid the late fee on this other application. Please waive, and we'll be able to verify that and not make you pay more than once. If something like that were to happen, what'll happen when you'll submit the one with the late fee, you'll submit the other one with the late fee waiver saying you've already paid the late fee. We'll see that happened and approve that, and it'll go back to you to complete the payment of the renewal fee only at that point in time. So, again, just get it in. Don't wait till it's late. And if you wait till it's late, try not to wait till you got a late fee. And if you have a late fee, get it in as soon as possible. Quicker it gets in, less late fee is going to be owed. Again, similar stuff here: letters, emails, calls, so on and so forth. The longer an organization's late, the more likely it may have one of these more stronger type of enforcement measures, like a cease and desist, or assurance of voluntary compliance, or assurance of discontinuance. Get the organization current. If you realize you're not current, you're several years behind, reach out to us. If you see it, just come to us and say, hey, I'm behind. What do I need to get you? We will be happy to help you get it in. We want you to succeed. We want you to comply. So earlier, the mentioning of investigating complaints and file a complaint. Secretary of State works with the Attorney General's office on investigations of potential violations of the Maryland Solicitations Act. You send a complaint of the violation of the Maryland Solicitations Act to us at the Secretary of State's office. We're going to look into it and review that complaint and decide what needs to happen in that particular case. The Secretary of State, we could deal with it, similar to registration. It could be something that can just be dealt with by letter, phone call, or email, then great. If it's something that's more of a serious matter, you get into the assurance of discontinuance, voluntary compliance realm, or even cease and desist order. And that's a determination that we're making when a potential violation presents a threat to the public's health, safety, and welfare, and requires an immediate end to charitable solicitations. So when we decide that this is the case, we issue a cease and desist order to the charitable organization, and the order notifies the respondents of the Secretary of State determined the respondents committed violations of the Solicitations Act. So the respondent in this particular situation would be the charity that is receiving the cease and desist order. So again, investigation and enforcement, collaboration there with the Secretary of State and the Attorney General's office, vital to regulating charities and ensuring successful outcomes against called rogue charities, ones that are out there breaking the law, violating the Maryland Solicitations Act. So we respond to complaints from citizens, donors, the public, law enforcement, media, charities themselves. Assistant Secretary Smith mentioned earlier, if somebody's using your name without your permission, let us know. If that happens, let us know, right? We'll respond to any complaint that we get. We obviously have to. We have our resources we have to manage those with, but send us the complaint, and if you're seeing something, let us know so we can look into it or figure out what needs to be done, if anything, with that particular complaint. Again, we have jurisdiction over the Maryland Solicitations Act, so we're talking about violations of the Maryland Solicitations Act for the types of complaints. Worst case scenario, you send us a complaint and it's not us, and we can refer you into the right direction or refer it to somebody else as necessary. Enforcement in actions, when we're taking an enforcement action, we're taking it on behalf of Maryland citizens in the public interest. We're doing it to ensure contributions are used for their intended purpose and that donors are not being misled. And we're determining whether there's a violation of the Maryland Solicitations Act, which again, Title VI, Business Regulation Article, Annotated Code of Maryland. So different things that happen from investigations. We get some informal actions that we're taking. Again, running down the scale of types of violations, informal actions like letters and phone calls, sometimes emails, sometimes something we call a letter agreement, where there's a letter that the charity needs to sign and return to us regarding whatever the violation was, to ensure that it's not going to happen again. And then running down on the more serious it gets, the more likely it is you're going to see a formal action, such as assurance of voluntary compliance or assurance of discontinuance, or summary cease and desist orders. You always hope it doesn't end up in that area. Sometimes it does, and needs to. When that's the case, that's what we do. But if it's something that can be settled using a more informal action or letter agreement type of resolution, then that's what we want to do. Cease and desist orders, issued notification via certified U.S. mail, regular U.S. mail. If we have your email, we're going to give it to you by email as well. 30 days to request a hearing. Notification of a hearing is sent both to the respondent, i.e. the charity, and the state via U.S. mail, certified and regular, and email. There's a hearing process that plays out if there's a cease and desist order issued. The purpose of the hearing is to hear evidence and argument requested by the respondent to basically undo the cease and desist order. And the respondent may be represented by counsel. It's an agency hearing, so we're not going to court if it's a cease and desist order hearing. It's an administrative hearing under the Maryland Administrative Procedures Act, Title 10 of the state government article. And at that hearing, it's going to be established that a proper notice was given and received. Only information relevant to the hearing is going to be heard. The hearing is going to occur. There's a proposed decision within 30 days based on the findings of fact and conclusions of law. And a final decision is made. The secretary decides whether to affirm the proposed decision and makes a determination if exceptions hearing is requested. There's an appeals process with judicial review allowed as well. The a little too fast there. The hope is that we don't ever have to get to that point, right? We talk about this here, but many situations, especially the I'll call maybe the less intentional registration-based type of violations, we always hope to settle in a much more informal way by letter, phone call, email, more of the informal action. But the longer it goes, the harder that becomes to do. You start getting into letter agreement or other type of settlements like assurance of voluntary compliance or continuance. And like I said, worst case, a cease and desist order. There's a bar that has to be met there with the cease and desist order. The public threat, we take that stuff seriously. But again, I think the point we try to make is we want you to succeed. We want you to comply. We want to help you comply when we can. So always reach out to us if you're unsure of something or unsure of a status. Page here just has some places you can go to that are good resources for nonprofit organizations in Maryland. We can't give you legal advice, right? We can give you information, and so some of these organizations have some very good information and resources for organizations to help them in various manners. Community Law Center, Maryland Nonprofits, the Maryland Nonprofit Development Center, and even your local bar associations have resources available to nonprofits, or can maybe even get you in touch with some folks that can help in different areas. So use these resources. If you did not write all these down fast enough, they are also on the main charity page of our website as well. If you scroll down a tad past the town hall area and all, and get to the if you are a charity section on our charity page, you'll find links to these resources there as well as other resources available for charitable organizations. So these, again, this recording will get posted online, and these will be there for you to look at as well. And you can go to the charity page to find them.
Yeah, and remembering that this presentation and the information that our office is providing is for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be legal advice. The office does not provide legal advice, but these are some sources from whom you may be able to solicit legal advice or ask for a resource from whom you can receive legal advice if you don't have counsel yourselves. So that's why we have this, so that you have that resource if you need it.
Yep. We have some upcoming town halls as well related to other charitable matters. One coming up about professional solicitors or fundraising councils, really geared more towards their registration requirements. Upcoming town hall about resolving delinquent charitable registration issues. So if you're delinquent, hopefully not, but if you are, town hall about that. But if you've taken anything else home from this town hall, reach out to us, right? Reach out to us, and if you're not current with your registration, figure out what it is that's needed. Town hall about filing with the Secretary of State, Comptroller, and State Department of Assessments and Taxation. very helpful. It can be confusing to draw a distinction between us three agencies and what you're filing with us for. We get a lot of calls that are intended for assessments and taxation or the comptroller. Hoping this town hall helps with that. There is a recording of a town hall that was done at the end of 2022. That's on our charity page that talks about this matter as well between us and the comptroller and assessments and taxation. And then donor education town hall here in late November of this year as well.
Great.
Turning it back to you.
Thanks so much, Mike. I really appreciate that. So thanks, Mike. Thanks to all of our charities who participated in today's town hall. As you know, these are not required. These are really educational and intended to provide you the guidance and information that we've discussed during the session. As promised, we'll go to any